Hello, everyone! The World Series of Poker Main Event is in full swing in Las Vegas. 10 days of pure no-limit Texas Hold'em. 10,000 players on the starting line. It's a real poker marathon. So far, we're only at the kickoff of day 2, but we're already enjoying it thanks to our hero, Adrián Mateos. On day 1, the Madrilenian got off to a flying start by bagging up 143,000 chips, more than double his starting stack. Today, Adrián is ready to start day 2 in a very good position, as the so-called Maquina is chip leader on his table. And on paper, no opponent seems to have the pedigree to stand in his way. In short, the coast is clear, and it's time to go for it.
Ready for day 2. Yesterday was a fantastic day, and well, we'll see which table I will get today. The strategy remains the same, to be very flexible depending on my table and my opponents. In the main event, the players have very marked tendencies. Some of them are very tight, others very aggressive. Some have advanced technical knowledge and some don't, so I think I have to be quite flexible in my game. I try to remind myself of that whenever I go to play these kinds of tournaments, especially the main events, where some people who are not used to playing for those amounts of money are very eager to go play this day 2. Registration is closing now. Some players can still enter on day 2, as this tournament is very, very deep and it's going to be a long day.
Let's go.
We have to keep in mind that the main event is a very, very long tournament. But you have to win chips, you have to play every hand the best you can, and I don't think it's a good approach to just wait for strong hands. I think most of the people who play this tournament take little risk, and I think the most profitable strategy is usually to be more aggressive than they are. Where's my table? Finding my table in this room is not easy. There are hundreds and hundreds of tables. But there's another factor that I have to take into account. I have several cameras on me. It's the only table around here that has cameras.
Hello.
Adrian. How's it going, man?
Hi.
Nice. Good to see you again.
To see you.
I'm lucky to be here.
Of course.
You were that dude under the gun one who said he folded ace king into the very last hand.
What?
Remember the very last hand of day 1 where I had the queens, ace jack, and he said he had ace king.
Oh.
Do you call there? Off 130K? I mean, he knows I'm strong. He knows I'm strong, but
You probably didn't have a queen, right?
sorry.
You probably
I
didn't have.
probably don't know.
Yeah, so
So you don't.
it's okay to fold. It's gonna be close.
I think with his stack though, I still might have. Still have 95K.
I mean, if your range is jacks, ace king, maybe.
All players checking into the main event. If you're late registration, make your way to the middle of the room.
Good.
The line is getting kind of long. Make sure you make your way to the middle of the room. As a reminder, players over here in the horseshoe, we will be starting the tournament at 7 minutes after due to the other repairs. So repairs on your reality. It is a 7-minute walk out here, so we can start the clock at 7 minutes after.
It's quite a coincidence in a tournament where there are thousands and thousands of players left to be seated again with a player I played with on day one. The player with the red cap. He's very nice. I was playing all of day one with him and I thought he was very cool. It's always nice to have a good time with people you like. At the end of the day, it's a 10 or 12 hour work day and it's nice to have a good atmosphere at the table.
All right, all players, you guys are being received to this time. To go with the buttons and the nines on today, 400, 800, 800, 400, 800, 800. Good luck, all players. Here, please, shuffle the video.
I don't know most of the players at the table. There's only one pro that I played with before, but it was years ago, and he was an online player. This new player sitting down, I don't know him. The player on my left is also a pro, but I don't know his style, and I know he doesn't play at high levels, at least in No Limit Hold'em. Here in America, there are several mixed games pros who also play in the main event, and I believe that's the case for him. The player in seat 7 is a regular online player that I haven't crossed much in recent years, but with whom I played a lot a few years ago live and online. A good hand.
18.
The player on the button calls. And the big blind, who is probably the most dangerous player at this table, is also in the hand. It's a flop where I'm going to have a high frequency of checking. Check. 9 of hearts. Here I can bet or check. Both are valid options. I decide to check. The river is a 6. It's a card that hits a bit more the big blind's range. It looks like he wants to bet, and here I have a bluff catcher. I lose against his value bets, but it's a hand I can call with that blocks some of the offsuit combos. And I think I have to call with ace high on this river against this small bet. I decide to call. I lose to both of them. The button has 7-7, which is a hand that should bet often on the flop or on the turn. Especially on the turn, he should pretty much always bet it. Oh well, we start by losing this small pot. A priori, this table seems a bit tougher than the one on day one. I think there are several professional players. Ace 2 of clubs. I decide to open from the hijack. The small blind calls, and so does the big blind. A flop that hits well my range. Even though it is true that on this flop the small blind is also hit often, especially because I think that many of his hands that were hesitating between 3-betting and calling are going to call more often against me, and that strengthens their range a bit. Still, with my hand, I think it's a clear continuation bet. A small sizing, I think it's the right bet, and I take this pot.
Then, yeah. People love it, so it's good show. And it's the first,
I'd like to see it, because I'm also part of the hands.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's the first time they allow us to do it in the main event. Because normally, the main event is.
While I'm talking about inside the mind of a pro, I need to open with these queens. I'm facing a 3-bet. I have a very strong hand that can either 4-bet or call the 3-bet. It's going to depend on how often I think the button is going to 3-bet me. I think he's not going to overdo it, and I'd rather just call. The profitability of the hand, whether I call the 3-bet or I 4-bet, is similar. I think that taking it post-flop will benefit me. 10-8-8 is a flop where he should often c-bet, quite often, and he doesn't do it. On this king, I'm going to check this hand in order to check call. A clear check call. Also with the queen of spades, I'm not expecting many bluffs from him either. River 3, here I have the best hand very, very often, and I think I'm going to value bet. I can make a big bet or a small bet, both are valid options. It all depends on what I want him to call with. The problem is that I don't think he has a lot of very strong hands with this betting sequence. Jacks would have c-bet, I think most 10x would c-bet. So I want him to call me with ace highs, or smaller pairs than my pair of queens. And in a slightly more exploitative way, I decide to make a small bet in order to get called more easily. And it works. Although any bet sizing would have been profitable on the river.
Only the last level, and they will record until I pass or win this tournament.
I often have the best hand, and so it's a matter of knowing how often he's going to decide to call. The player on the cutoff opens with a short stack. He has 17 blinds, more or less. I decide to call with this hand from the small blind. Check around to the initial raiser. Let's see what he decides to do. He decides to bet small. And I think that my hand has to continue here, sometimes by calling, sometimes by raising. I think it's a good candidate to raise with. A lot of my King X are going to want to raise and go all in. And I need to put in some bluffs. The most common ones are flush draws. But I also think that making a bluff that raises then fold to a jam is important, and this would be one of them. I don't need to put in too many bluffs, but I do need to put in some. And I think my hand is a great candidate. He calls me. That is bad news. Let's see if I get a good card on the turn. Number this turn is very bad. It doesn't give me more equity. This leaves an SPR, which is the ratio of the pot with respect to his stack. It's quite small, with 14,000 in the pot and 9,000 left in his stack. At this point, I probably only have two options, either check or jam. My hand has to check. It's not good enough to jam here. Even if it's a bluff, I don't think he has a high enough percentage of folds. Since it's a three-way pot, it's very likely he has a king. People with these stacks play flush draws in a more straightforward way. And I expect him to shove with most of his heart flush draws on the flop, more than he should. And on this river, I hardly have any value considering the betting sequence. And I have to be very careful about the bluffs I make here when I'm not representing much. I'm gonna check fold and give up my hand. If he shoves, I have a hand that only beats a bluff in a sequence where I'm not expecting to see a lot of bluffs. He decides to shove and I fold. I don't think he has enough bluffs. As I said before, I think most of his bluffs come from missed flush draws, and that people tend to play draws in a more straightforward way when they're short stacked. A bit of folding. It's a long tournament, you have to play the hands that matter, and often the best decision is to just fold. Ace Queen.
18.
18 raise.
A standard open. A player on my left 3-bet me.
36 raise.
This hand is more complex than it looks. Ace Queen off is a candidate for 3 options. The fold would be pretty tight, but the call of the 3-bet and the 4-bet are both valid options, and this will depend on the opponent's 3-bet frequency. If the opponent only plays value, it could be a fold. But he is a professional player. I think he's going to have bluffs, and that this hand plays better, either as a call or as a 4-bet. I decide to call. I get a very good flop. Theoretically, on this flop, he should continue with all of his range. He decides to check. It's a mistake theoretically, and here I very often have the best hand. I don't think he's checking ace-king. and I'm going to be able to start betting for value. I think I have 2 clear streets of value, and I like to take them. That's the turn. I don't have a lot of bluffs either, because in the end, my bluffs are going to have little equity, like some Jack 10 or a small pair that I decide to turn into a bluff. I chose to bet small. And the river is a 3, a blank, which allows me to go for a clear value bet on the river. Here, I'm trying to think about the most he could pay me with a worse hand. He's basically representing kings, jacks, and these kind of hands most of the time. And then it's a matter of whether he wants to call or not. I bet 2/3 of the pot. On the river, I can go for any bet sizing basically, because I have the best hand almost 100% of the time. It's a question of thinking in an exploitative way. This player profile, what's the most profitable bet to make against him? I think this bet sizing is going to make him very uncomfortable with his entire range. And he's going to have to bluff catch with a part of his hands and fold with another. It's going to be a difficult decision because his mistake was to check the flop, making his hand very easy to read. He decides to call. I show ace queen and win. I expected him to have something like kings or queens. Nice pot. And I keep raking in chips. It folds to me.
18.
18. 18, wait.
The player on the cutoff calls pretty quickly. And the big blind is in the hand as well. Let's see if I get a good flop. It's a flop where I could mix it up. I could check or bet. Both are valid options. Theoretically, this hand is more of a check, but I like to put pressure. Especially in this tournament where I think my opponents are going to play less aggressively than they should and are going to punish me less. Five of hearts. Here, I have a cheap bluff. I want to get him to fold his 8x, make him suffer with his 10x. I decide to keep betting about 3/4 of the pot. I think he could fold better hands, and I start putting pressure on him. Plus, when he has a better hand, I still have a few outs on the river. He calls me, which is not good news. Let's see. Aboard pairing 5, no good. I can bluff, but I have a little bit of showdown value. Sometimes I can win on the river. Ace Queen with the Queen of Hearts, Jack 9 with a heart, Queen Jack with a heart. He has a flush. Good check. I save a bluff because this hand wasn't folding. I think there's no need to bluff with this hand because occasionally, not very often, but occasionally I win if it goes check check. And I have better candidate hands to bluff with. It's the break.
Patrick, ¿me regalas una foto?
Sí, sin problema. Un segundo. Ahí está.
Gracias, nos vemos. Suerte.
First break of the day. The cues are terrible.
What's up? Good? Good luck.
Players, you got just over 1 minute left on your break. You should be making way back to your seats at this time. Main event players, just over 1 minute remaining on your break. Please start taking your seats.
We're starting the second level of the day.
Welcome back from break. We're going to carry out 500 small blind, 1,000 big blind, 1,000 big blind ante. Dealers, shuffle up and deal.
People are running, not to miss any hand at the end of the break. Since there are so many people, this is why I get back to the table a few minutes early, because sometimes the cues make you miss a hand. Six on the button. An obvious call. $87 blinds for the initial raiser, so we're pretty deep. He bets 1/3. With no heart, my hand is a standard fold. Here, being in position with this bet sizing and with a heart, I think I have to continue. He checks very quickly. And here, the question is whether I should turn my hand into a bluff and start betting, since it's my worst pair to call the flop with, or if I check to try to take my hand to showdown. The river completes the flush and hits ace-king. Here, I have a very clear bluff. I wonder, I'd take a look at his stack, and I made it here with the worst hand. I want to bluff, and I need to decide on the sizing. I think I have to represent a strong hand, such as a flush, 2-pair plus, a straight, etc. And surely a big sizing would probably work well. I decide to bet a pot and a half. It's a sizing I would go for with hands better than 2-pair. He folds and I take this pot. The good thing about being in position in these types of hands is that sometimes you win a showdown, sometimes you get profitable bluffs on later streets. A good hand. It is very common in the main event to see a very low 3-betting frequency. Most opponents want to survive in the tournament and will have little aggression when making 3 bets, which allows me to open more hands. That's not the case here, because this is a very strong one that I would open every time. But I have to be careful post-flop, because they will have stronger hands than expected when they call. Here I decide to continue. A small bet, as it is a multi-way pot. The big blind raises on this flop. Here there should only be very few raises. This raise is not good news. My hand is pretty strong and I can't fold. But here he shouldn't raise very often, because I have ace-king, king-king, and ace-ace in my range, which he doesn't have. And being relatively deep, he should be quite careful with his hands. A very good turn. Although most hands that were beating me on the flop still beat me on the turn. Apart from King 4 suited, which is a hand that could check raise sometimes. Here, when he decides to check, I think I have to bet for value. I can't give him a free card for his flush draws, and he could check raise with a worse ace, such as ace-10 or ace-jack. I decide to bet 1/4 of the pot. He calls me, and the river is an 8. Here I have a very strong hand, but also his range is a bit strange, because assuming he should have very few check raises on the flop, on this flop, I'm trying to think about which hands could call me with worse. He has ace-jack, ace-10, maybe a king X of clubs, but he doesn't have many. I check back because I don't expect a lot of ace-jack or ace-10. I think these kind of hands are going to call me, and I don't expect ace-X or king-X to bluff catch on the river when I have a lot of trips in my range. It's a pretty tight check, but I think this player profile is not going to check raise me with worse trips, and that he could slow play with ace-4 thinking that I'm going to value bet trips on the river and end up value cutting myself.
So we're like 50.
Pair of deuces. A standard defense on the open of a player in early position. My hand here can either donk bet or check. Both are valid options. I decide to donk bet. Turn 8, and well, same situation then on the flop. The check and the small bet are both acceptable options. And I don't have much. The river is very bad. And here, the question is whether I have to bluff or not. I have quite a few potential bluffs, but a lot of my most common 6x or 7x are going to want to keep betting on this 8, so I don't have as many as it looks like. 2-2, I don't block the weakest part of his range, which could be queen jack, king high, etc. And I have a clear candidate to bluff. If I bluff, I have to decide the sizing. I have two choices, that is, one sizing representing my 5x, 6-6, 7-7, these type of hands, and another sizing representing the full house. I choose the sizing representing the full house and bet 2.5 times the pot, a very big sizing that I would make with any of my full houses, with an 8, with a 4x, even sometimes with a straight that is played this way. On the river, I think it's a mandatory bluff. It's one of my best combos to bluff, and sometimes bluffing is just the right decision. Glad it worked out well.
So you guys just have to game.
On the button, with a strong hand. Usually this hand is going to be in my 3 betting range.
Raise.
He calls very quickly. He seems to have no doubt about his decision. Check 10-9. It's a very wet flop on which theoretically I should make a continuation bet with the vast majority of my range. The flush gets there. I have the king of spades. And here I'm hesitating between checking and realizing my equity or continuing to bet. The problem is, this card is often going to hit his range on the turn. And I shouldn't bluff too much. I don't think he's folding a straight or a set, and it's common. And after, he checked quickly. I don't represent much on the river. He had ace-queen. It's a hand that won't fold. I'm happy with realizing my equity.
This second day is off to a pretty good start, Adrian. Not only have you made the most of your good hands, but you've also managed to turn trash into gold by playing much weaker combinations very aggressively. After 3 hours of play in this day 2, here you are with 180,000 chips and blinds at 501,000. We'll be back to cheer you on in the next episode of Inside the Mind of a Pro.